everybody. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey. Delighted to welcome the very gifted empath and talented clairvoyant medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise, who will be speaking to us today from Marshall, Texas. Rita is a best-selling author who has appeared on both radio and television, spoken at many conferences. Hundreds of her articles have been published worldwide, and she's produced both full-length and feature videos. To say she's a multitasker is an understatement. Her most recent book, which we will talk about today, is titled The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist: Create Healthy Relationships by Healing Childhood Trauma. To say her offerings are prodigious is an understatement. She's a graduate of the Berkeley Psychic Institute, where she studied meditation, energy medicine, and learned how to perform intuitive clairvoyant readings. And after graduation, she returned to school to earn a degree as a naturopath and a Ph.D. in natural health counseling. Phew. She's also a Reiki Master, a Certified Hypnotherapist, a Certified Mindfulness Practitioner, and the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics, which trains students in the art of medical intuition, intuitive counseling, and energy medicine. Plus, she has a private practice of her own. And there's more. She's a professor of alternative health studies at Westbrook University in West Virginia, and she's the chairman of the board for the International Association of Medical Intuitives. She served on the board of directors for the Holistic Chamber of Commerce, and through her work, she has been recognized by the National Register's Who's Who in executives and professions. I'm looking forward to chatting with the multifaceted and gifted Dr. Rita Louise about many things, including how her newest book, titled Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist: Create Healthy Relationships by Healing Childhood Trauma, was inspired by the insights she gained about her own toxic relationships being rooted in her upbringing and family of origin. The strategies she devised in her youth to help her overcome her deep shyness, and how she helps people to make better choices for their lives through her intuitive clairvoyant readings, medical intuition readings, and spiritual energy medicine healings. Dr. Louise is known for working with the whole person, body, mind, and soul, to get to the cause of a person's concerns. Our bodies, minds, and souls will surely be deeply touched and inspired by this wonderful insights-filled interview with her today. Hi, Rita. A very long introduction, but a truly warm and heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
It's truly my pleasure. And I think that we're going to have a lot of fun together. Mm-hmm. So let's start by having you tell us about the abuse you experienced during your childhood and how it drew you towards spiritual self-discovery when you were only 8 years old, and how spiritual pursuits became your lifelong passion.
Well, I don't know if it was the abuse that drove me in that area. So our family were a sci-fi horror family, so we watched things like One Step Beyond and The Twilight Zone and The Prisoner and The Blob and Frankenstein. And so we were always kind of brought up with kind of looking at things from a different perspective. And seeing you'll resonate with this, and when I was a kid, there were two TV shows on. One was The Amazing Kreskin, which if I can get a nickel for every time I say his name, and he had ESP, and so he was like a mentalist, and he could like tell people stuff. And then there was another series called The Sixth Sense, which not the movie, it was a TV series about a college professor who had ESP. And I was just drawn to that, at that age. And it just became a passion for me, just digging in to anything that I could find that would give me insights, because I had decided that I wanted to become psychic at that point in time. And
And you weren't afraid. I mean, there are people whose children have gifts and they get nervous, and what should I do about it? But what is the abuse you experienced? Because that abuse must have led you towards what you're doing now with this kind of book and all of that.
Well, with the dysfunctional dance, and so, I make this a joke, but if you look at it from the outside, it's a little sad. I've been married 4 times. I've had multiple relationships. See, I do get a little reprieve because my last husband passed away, who was the freaking best one of them all, and
Well, you got smarter with each choice.
I don't know. The last couple of relationships I've had, actually, definitely not so smart.
Oh, wow.
And actually in this moment, I am ending a relationship with someone, which has been actually interesting because I feel very empowered this time, as opposed to going into a grief thing. But the person I was dating prior to him, he was very narcissistic, but he also had, either he was a really hardcore drunk, or he had some kind of a psychological issue going on, and I never could separate. And I told him, if this is a psychological issue, let's get you on some kind of meds or whatever. But the drinking always overpowered everything. And he was terrible. And actually, here's another piece of the story. So I'm breaking up with him. You'll love this story. So I literally took all of his stuff, loaded it, got a friend to come over, loaded it in a truck because he was staying about 2 hours away. And I knew that if I didn't take, the mountain to Muhammad, that Muhammad would never come to the mountain. So the friend dropped me off at a little diner. And while I'm sitting in the diner, my ex-husband, so the one that I was married to before the one that died, it gets very confusing. His wife calls me and she's like, yeah, I'm having some problems with him, and, can we talk? And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? And she was like, he's a narcissist. And it was like she put a light bulb in my mind, because that husband and the boyfriend had a lot of very similar characteristics.
So you keep repeating patterns. Was your father a narcissist? Were your parents?
My mother.
Your mother was the narcissist. So you keep marrying your mother.
And then I wonder why I have mommy issues. But what was interesting is that, for how intuitive I am and, working with other people, I was really blindsided by that revelation. And that revelation caused me to go and dig into what's going on and, what do I need to do to fix this? Because obviously, I'm going back, relationships, friendships, back to my family of origin. And I was just flabbergasted. And so how you were sitting there before we came on air talking about how spirit says, you need to do this or you need to do that. So as I was doing my own self-healing, I got a message, because they dump stuff on me. It's like, you need to write a book about this, or you need to write a book. It's always very short. You need to write a book. And I'm like, okay, so then I started like taking more notes while I was doing my research. And I was like, okay, well, I can start kind of putting words on paper. And the message I got was, you need to tell your story. You're not going to get any juice from us until you tell your story. And that was like, and publish it.
And that's like getting naked for the world, because you're going to expose everything that's happened, all warts and all.
Pretty much. But I have to tell you, it was one of the most healing parts of the whole thing, because it made it so that I didn't have to run away from it anymore. And I didn't have to hide, that anymore. It just became part of me. And it, so I'm very grateful that they forced me into having to do that. Oh, and then you'll appreciate this. And I don't share this little piece of information on air very often. So I was writing literally the last chapter, finishing the last chapter, and my mother, the abuser, passed away. And, one of the things that I had internalized was that I would not publish the book until after she passed away, because I couldn't do that to her, and yeah, I was finishing up the very last chapter.
Perfect divine timing. That was like divine timing.
Yeah.
And she's probably learning a lot now from the other side as she's witnessing what you're doing. What was your father's deal with it? Was he the empath?
I mean, I'm going to guess so. My dad had a lot of friends. He was, I'm going to say socially active, but in a more helping kind of way. So He ran the bingo. He did Meals on Wheels for HIV people at the church once a week. So he was like the head cook and would make, 30 meals for Meals on Wheels. He did that for years. My mom at one point in time, she got a job doing social work and was working at an old age home. And my dad was retired by then. And so he would go down, and this is his words, not mine. He would go play pinochle with the old ladies, and so he was always very involved with people in a helping, supportive role.
But, here's your mother, a narcissist, and she's a social worker.
Don't even get me started.
I mean, so one day, I want to say, because I'm in through this podcast, I'm encouraging people to go for healing. So one of the messages is you also need to be discerning about who you choose as your healer, because not all healers have healed themselves. Some of them definitely have their own issues that they continue to work through. I mean, I'm passionate about getting people to healing, but you need to, that's why I have these interviews, and also you can hear who these people are and get your own feel for them. As well,
and my mom didn't start doing social work until much later in life. Like, she went back to college at 42 and graduated the salutatorian of her class, and then went and worked for 10 years. But I remember her reading all these psychology books. So, I mean, there was some part of her wanting to heal or wanting to fix what was going on. And that dynamic is really interesting. And I could see where there was a part of her that was just very wounded.
Well, she probably got it from your grandparents. I mean, you don't know what, it usually, someone in the line, in my family, it was me. And it sounds like now it's you. Someone on the line needs to stop it, heal it, and change the dynamic. And until that, and then everyone around has their choices of how they're going to react to that, right? Stay in their old paradigm or move forward. And so that generational stuff gets passed down the line until someone says, it's enough. It's enough. And then someone like Rita comes out with a book about the dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist, and you go, here it is. Okay, I have to turn a new page, right?
Well, and I'm going to say, like, it's a really good book for New Yorkers, because it is just like straightforward and a little on the raw side, but it really makes you stop and look at yourself, and do an inner inventory of what's going on inside. And, one of the most common comments I've gotten has been, it made me cry. And I'm like, well, that's good. That means that you're feeling it and you're releasing it and grieving it and acknowledging it.
Well, you're acting also as a mirror for them, because what you're doing is identifying it so they can see it in themselves. So one of the things that you do, first of all, aside from all of this, I really want to talk to you about your story about two things: how you overcame your deep shyness, because that's great to know in general for people, and also how you help people make better choices in their lives with your clairvoyant readings. So if someone's listening to you and falling in love with you right now, well, how do you help people through your medical intuition readings, your spiritual energy medicine readings, your clairvoyant readings? And then as a sidebar, how the heck did you overcome deep shyness as a kid? And what was that from? Too many shows with the outer?
No. Well, and I'm sitting there going, because I'll talk about that story on air. I'm like, okay, I don't remember putting that in an article or somewhere, or anyway. So I come from a very large family. I am one of 8. very loud New York, Jewish Puerto Rican family.
I can relate to part of that.
And, you know, my birth order was number 3. And the way the dynamics were, I was considered a big kid, you know, but I had all of the responsibility of being one of the big kids and in charge. But since I was the youngest, I had absolutely no power. And so I was trained to just basically shut up. And
look at you now.
I know. I mean, I'll tell people, it's like, well, you know, I used to be really shy, and they're like,
right. So how did you overcome this thing?
So when I was 19, I left New York.
So you were shy all the way up to 19. You still hadn't kicked it yet.
No. No, by the time I moved to California, I was really not in a good place. I had been beaten down very hard, and it was all I could do to escape. And I went there, and I mean, I was overweight, and now I'm like really scrawny, but I was overweight, and I really didn't like who I was. And it wasn't because, and you know, just because I didn't like how I was interfacing with the world. And I knew that for me to change that, I had to change me. And so,
you know, that's a big statement though, Rita. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people want everything around them to change. And really the core of it is that you have to do the change. Right?
Exactly. And so this is going to sound so stupid, but it really was my life. And so I would walk to work because I was 19. I literally moved to California with $125, no place to live, no friends, because I was going to go to school there.
Plucky girl, aren't you?
Cojones. That's what people say. She had big cojones.
Right. Courageous.
Got a job within a week. That was within walking distance of where I was living. And on my way to work, there was a 7-Eleven, and I would make myself tasks. And so my task for a while, this is going to sound so lame, was I'm going to walk into 7-Eleven and say hi to the person behind the counter before they interacted with me. It was a freaking white knuckle scenario. It was really hard, but it's like, and you know, and I would stop outside the store and I'd be like, and I would go and do it, you know, and I just would give myself little tasks. You know, I've done a lot of wellness expos, whole life expo, new life expo, and I would give myself the task of going up to someone in a booth. I mean, because I would have a booth and just saying hi and shaking their hand and, you know, ask them their name. I mean, because it was hard. It was hard. So obviously, you know, I don't do that anymore.
Obviously. Wow. That's amazing that you were that shy. Wow. So tell us about how you help people before we start to really talk even more about your book and all.
Okay.
How do you really help people? Because you do 3 main things. You have intuitive clairvoyant readings, and you have medical intuitive readings and spiritual energy. First of all, define those things and then tell us how you work with people.
Okay, so clairvoyant readings, I think most people, if I say, you know, it's like having a psychic reading, although the term is a little more specific. I tend to be a very visual person. And so if there's something going on, I will see it in my mind's eye, you know, like you can see your car or your bedroom or your mother's face, you know, that's where I see it. I mean, I tend to be a little multimedia, you know, I'm very sensitive to people's feelings. I have become more auditory, where I will get auditory messages.
I mean, have you trained for this, or it's just?
Well, I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute, you know, and I told you earlier, you know, I wanted to be psychic when I was a kid, and I'm like, this ain't happening, and studied with them. But after being in the program for 3 weeks, I came to the stark realization that I had been very psychic my whole life. And when you walk up to someone who is out the day before and they have a little Band-Aid on the top of their head and you walk up to them and go, well, where were you yesterday? Having them check for a brain tumor, just being a smart ass. And that was where they were.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I started going back over my life and these coincidences, these weird coincidences. And it's like, wow, you've been doing this like a long time. And so, so that's the clairvoyant part. The medical intuitive. So a medical intuitive is someone that uses their intuition, but they really talk about health related issues. So one of the things that I discovered kind of while I was at Berkeley, but they didn't really talk about medical stuff. But with some of the people there and then in my private practice was that it was very easy for me to tap into physical issues that were going on in a person's body. And that's one thing that I would love to share with everyone is that just because you're psychic doesn't mean that you do everything. Like, I don't do dead people. I don't want dead people coming to my house. If you ask me about a particular
You're a healer,
person,
you're not a medium, you're a healer.
Right, but many people have the preconception that if you say psychic, that's also in your bailiwick.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm more of like, what's going on with you, on multiple levels.
Can you tell people what's going to go on with them also?
I don't do predictions. I don't think that, I think that we have free will, and I think that the universe works in a lot of different ways. I think that there are moments where we might get a premonition or something like that, but I think it is not, and I might be biased here. I would love to meet someone who does give predictions and they really do come true. I think we have moments where we're giving that very specific message to pass on. But if I have a client calling me at 2:00, it's not like being a channel where you kind of go into your channel mode. There isn't like I'm doing a prediction mode, So anyway, so no, I don't do that, but I will look at the possibilities and the probabilities and like, this is where your energy is, and this is the thing you're trying to do or not do. And what are the chances of it happening? What are the obstacles? Are there obstacles? Are there other people around it? What do you need to do to get to B, from point A to point B?
Wow. And tell us about the spiritual energy medicine healings.
Okay. So all of this kind of works together. And so when I work with someone, if they come with a straightforward health issue, then I can look in their body and assess their kidney and, tell them if there's inflammation or if there is buildup in it and they need to do some kind of cleansing work, and talk to them about herbs and supplements that might be helpful for them. But also in that kidney, they might be having issues on the next level down with, they're working too hard. There's someone that's in their life. They're with a narcissist. We'll just jump right in there. They're with a narcissist. And so all they've been doing is giving their energy away to this other person. But that depletion is showing up in their kidney. And so I'll make that communication. It's like, okay, this is being robbed, but usually there's something sitting underneath that will give information about why it's being robbed, like why they're choosing to give their energy away.
Oh, that's interesting.
If somebody comes to me with a relationship question, or they want to move, or they want information about a job, I'll talk about pretty much anything except dead people. Unless it's a ghost.
Tell us about the ghost.
And this was not really anything that I planned ever on getting into career-wise, but I do a lot of spirit release work with people. I wrote one article. Well, actually, I ended up writing a book about it. Spiritual release work.
Release work. Okay.
Mm-hmm. because there is a phenomena about that revolves around entity attachments. And so I'm going to kind of give some vocabulary here. So if you have a ghost in your house, like I live in a 100-year-old house, and there's a couple of ghosts that live here, so my house is haunted because I got these dead people that live here, and they're very nice to me, and we don't bother each other. If you have an entity attachment, its goal is to manipulate you. They are the narcissists of the spirit world, and they will attach themselves to you to get you to be in a certain emotional place, because that's the energy that they feed off of. They're energetic parasites. And, so I work with people to get rid of them. But there's a caveat. It's like people are like, oh, well, get rid of it. But usually the entity will attach because there's something deficit in the person
that needs healing.
Because usually the entity will come in and bother the person because now they're triggered,
right?
And it's opened the door to the entity. So regardless of the kind of work that I'm doing, intuitive work, there's always the opportunity to do energy healing, a Reiki.
So like type. Someone comes to you and you see that they have this attachment. Mm-hmm. How do you get it out of them?
It's a process. How's that? It's not
pray over it, or does the person have to take a proactive stance with you to do something?
I mean, most of my clients want me to fix it, which makes it take forever. I actually have been working with one woman who has been very proactive, and I'll just say, okay, so this is what it's attached, this is another angle on it, or this is some part of you that still needs healing. And she has just gone off and done stuff
to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about those entity attachments, and I know healers who like you, who are able to help people get rid of them, and they really can screw up a person, and you don't know why you're all having all these problems, right?
Well, entity attachments come from a couple of very standard places, from trauma or drug and alcohol abuse. And I'll just disclose this here. The reason I know about entities is because I had one. And worked very hard to get rid of it.
Now yours came from where did yours decide to launch into you from?
I just know that I had it my whole life, so I would assume from the trauma. I would say, I experienced some very core trauma at about 3 years old. And then the crap didn't go away.
Talk about it, or would you rather not?
I was 3, so I don't really have, there was just a lot of stuff that went on during that period of time, but not necessarily like specifically from my like my mother, but like, as an example, we lived on the 14th floor in the Bronx. And my brother and I were racing down the hall from the elevator, and I was beating him. He was older. I was beating him, and he tripped me, and it banged my face into the floor, and I had to have my 2 front teeth removed.
Well, that would be, oh my God, there's trauma over there, right there.
No, there was that part, but then there was for 2 years them singing "All I Want for Christmas Is My 2 Front Teeth." That was a bigger freaking trauma. I'm gonna tell you. True story. Okay, I'm getting like little goosebumps. So, this was a number of years ago, and my mom asked me what I wanted for Christmas. And I just said, I want my 2 front teeth. And so she sent me a box because she saved our baby teeth, and she sent me 2 front teeth.
Oh my God.
And it's like, it makes me even want to cry just sharing that story, because it was just like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this since I was like 3.
Wow. No, these were your baby teeth. So you're
correct.
So thank God your adult teeth eventually grew in.
Yeah, I was almost 6 before they grew in.
Right. So you had to go through all of that until, when I was researching your book, they talked about that that a recent Facebook survey of people who self-identify as being empathic had revealed a startling insight that over 80% of the 1,300 respondents disclosed they had suffered from some form of abuse or neglect during their childhood. So please tell us, why does that abuse or neglect lead to a person becoming either an empath or a narcissist?
Good question. So I'm going to start with the empath. You know, and it's interesting because people that would listen to a show like this are people that tend to be more empathic. You know, they're interested in self-growth and self-discovery, much more than a narcissist would ever be.
Yeah, but if they're married to a narcissist or living with a narcissist, this is going to help them identify that.
Right, but they're probably the empath.
Right.
Okay, repeat part of the question because I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I was going, why does an abuse or neglect in a person's childhood
I'm back.
lead to
I'm
either
back.
one?
And so imagine this. You are 5 years old and mommy and daddy are fighting, but you're in the other room, but you know, you're already sensitive. You know, children are sensitive in general.
Right.
You know, so you're feeling the anger or the hostility, or you're hearing these bad sounds and you just go hide and you wait for it to change, the energy to change, to know that now you can relax. You know, daddy's an alcoholic, the door opens up, you know, you sit there and kind of put your antenna out. It's like, is he drunk? You know, is this a safe place to be? And so they grow up with years of practice feeling into their environment to make sure it's safe. I mean, I was just like, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So a narcissist, on the other hand, you know, they also come from places of trauma. I mean, there is a psychological condition of narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder. I'm going to make the assumption that there's a certain chemical piece tied to that as well, you know, but that's at the very far end of the spectrum of people. And so for them, it's like they experience this trauma, but they don't want to heal it. You know, my kind of base feeling about it is they lose hope. They give up. And so instead of sitting there coming back and praying that it's going to be different, you know, it's like, okay,
but
well,
are they even aware that they have a problem? I mean,
not necessarily as an adult. No. But as a child, it's like they won't re-engage, you know, or they'll put on what's called the false self, which is like a mask. And so even though they're scared of mommy, they're going to act like mommy's little helper, you know, and take all of the things that they're feeling and then just stuff it down inside of them. And all of that hurt and pain, you know, where an empath, it's like they want to get rid of it. They want to understand it. They want to change it. The narcissist, it's like, oh, there's nothing there. No, I don't hurt. I'm just going to shove it over there. And then they spend years working on this camouflage, that this is what I present to the world, but this is really what I feel on the inside, because what I present to the world is what they want to see, you know, and this is what they think is healthy. You know, it's like the preacher who everybody loves the preacher, but then he goes home and he beats his kids. You know, it's like, and people are just shocked because it's like, but it's the preacher. He's like the most loving and kind person. It's like, well, maybe not on the inside. He's not.
So what you're saying is the empath is, in a way, is more authentic of a person than a
much
narcissist.
More.
So the narcissist deals with all of this pain, stuffs it, creates a camouflage with it, and never faces it. So he's busy beating everybody up with his pain.
Well, you know, he puts that mask on, he puts that camouflage on, but he can only sustain the image for so long. You know, so you hear story. Actually, my late husband that I mentioned earlier, So I was wife number 6 for him.
Oh my gosh. So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
You're such a smart lady. Wouldn't you say there's a heads up here if the man's been married 5 times and before, or you just...
So he was a very kind person, and he came from a family of trauma, and his dad was, I met his dad. We stayed with his parents for a few days, and there was something that happened with the dog, and he got upset, and literally this man's like eyes turned red as he was getting warmed up, and I saw that, and I'm like, oh my God. It's like, that's what you had to grow up with. I mean, there was like a freaking demon that would go into that man, and he caught himself and he turned it off because that was the mask. You know, and so no, his comment when we got married was, well, I'm waiting. And I'm like, waiting for I mean, this is it. You know, I'm a one size fits all type of personality. And he goes, well, I'm waiting. And I'm like, waiting for what? And he goes, I'm waiting for you to change. I'm like, change to what? He goes, well, that's happened in every one of my other marriages. As soon as they said I do, they became a totally different person.
Or did he become a totally different person?
No, he was pretty consistent. He was a great guy.
So, but you ended up changing too because you divorced him too.
No, he died.
Oh, he died. This is the one who died.
This is the one who died. It was like, I finally meet a good one. I mean, people will say, you know, he was your soulmate, you know, and it's just like, screw you, universe, you know.
Right. Oh, wow. What a thing. So another thing I read about when I was researching this was that you talk about in your book different parenting styles that lead to healthy or unhealthy adults and the primary attachment styles for each. I'll bet a lot of people listening to us, Rita, would love to learn about that because they're raising children or they have grandchildren or whatever. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
You know, it's not something that I talk about a lot. So I might need to, if I have a book here, kind of refresh myself real quick. There we go. Just in case people want to see.
By the way, everybody, absolutely.
You know, people are like, why did you put that picture on there? And I'm like, you know, if you've suffered from abuse, it's like you can't talk. The shame keeps you silent. And that's why I put that picture on there.
And you're often afraid to tell other people that you had a less than perfect childhood either. And then people hide that too.
Well, you know, it makes you don't want people to think less of you.
Right. Right. And people have that tendency to judge. I was just very curious because you talked about the primary attachment styles for an empath and a narcissist. So we're talking about the fact that the empath is scouting out everything as she walks into a room or as he walks into a room. So her attachment style or his attachment style is different from the kid to the parents, a parenting style that nurtures a narcissist. Okay.
I mean, their attachment styles can be the same. You know, there's a secure attachment style, you know, where you're feeling loved and nurtured by the parent, you know, and then there are other attachment styles where you get hot and cold messages from your parents, like, I love you, but then not so much, and I love you. And so they become very fearful and end up growing up with a certain kind of characteristics. They tend to be kind of clingy. You know, they don't really know what's going on.
That's because they don't have a secure attachment.
Well, they don't have a secure attachment, but when they do have an attachment, it's like, kind of depending on where they are, they can perceive it in different ways, you know, because they're internally not functioning necessarily correctly. You know, because basically your parents are your primary connection. And so what you learn over time is, I can't trust them. They're not safe. You know, can I believe what they have to say? And so it can manifest in different ways that they try to get their needs met, but usually it has to do with, being very fear-based, or having a lot of anxiety.
Where does control come from? Rita, people who are very, very controlling, what is the parenting style that leads to that?
Well, I mean, that would be like an authoritarian parent, where they just tell you, this is what I want, and this is how I want it. And if you step outside the box, you're corrected. So like my mom, I used to salute her and call her sir, because she was very like, with everything that happened. And, so there are some things like I can recognize it, and this is going to sound silly, in my adult life that I don't even want to say I like being a certain way, but I get triggered if it's not a certain way. So for some reason, I have been using this story lately. So my mom had this weird baseboard issue. So if you cleaned your room and you did a good job, so instead of saying, hey, it looks good, she would always find something that was not done, and then make you fix it. And so there would be countless times that she would like come into my room, or I had to clean a second room in the house. And she would be like, well, the baseboards aren't clean.
So it was always something. You can never satisfy her.
No. And so, but now as an adult, if I have company, I have the cleanest freaking baseboards. I mean, I don't clean them every day or every week or whatever, but if I'm having company, having clean baseboards, and like right now my baseboards are like 8 inches tall, so, and there's a lot of them. But I have clean baseboards because that means you did it correctly. But you grow up in that, and that just becomes that mindset of this is how the world is. I mean, in our formative years, we come in like a blank slate, and our life experiences are what creates the programs that we're operating on. And
until we heal, and we can change until we heal them, maybe, and we can change.
Correct. And that's just where I was going to go. And so if you think about it, those patterns are like a path in the woods, and so if something happens, our natural inclination is to go down that well-worn path because it's familiar. We know where it's going to go, blah, blah, blah. But when we start to make changes, we are cutting a new path. So I'll go back to my saying hi at 7-Eleven. That first time going and saying hi to the guy behind the register at 7-Eleven was like, I am in the thicket and I have a machete and I am cutting a path, but as I did it more and as I kind of expanded it, still addressing that fear, because a lot of our programming is fear-based, it made the path bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are times where I'll be in situations where I don't talk that much. And I don't know if it's me or I get overwhelmed by energy. Like if it's a group situation, I sometimes get overwhelmed. So I haven't quite figured that out, but yeah, I don't.
Wow. So tell us about what do choosing self-worth, self-love, and happiness have to do with ending this dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist?
Okay. So one of the things that happens with empaths, and I'm going to even characterize that differently. So out on the planet, there are a number of unhealed empaths, that came from this family of trauma, or have experienced difficulty in their lives. And they're the ones that tend to be the narcissist magnet, because they go through life as people pleasers, or they learn to be codependent, because if I do what you want, then the vibration in the room, the dynamic between us is calm. And all I want is calm. And I will do anything I can to have it be calm. And so as they sit there and start working on themselves, one of the main things is creating some boundaries, and saying, this is what's important to me. But with that, also recognizing that they might experience that not calm from the other person, but it's still to their benefit, again, cutting that new path, because if you tell somebody no, they maybe don't like it that much.
Well, like they're taking a big chance because that person, they're married to the narcissist or whatever, and they're finally setting a boundary. That person's not going to like that. There'll be repercussions for that.
And it can be hard, we were talking about me talking, and I still have some issues in expressing my inner needs. And I remember in this most current relationship, telling him something that I needed, but it was on a really deep kind of soul level thing. And I remember going in the room, swear to God, this wasn't even that long ago, and literally white knuckling the chair, literally white knuckling, and so I think two pieces, because I know we're kind of coming to the end here, is
one more time,
but it's our responsibility to make sure that we're happy. No one else can make us happy. And so if we're walking around every day miserable, then we're not happy, and we're not, that's the person that you're with might be happy because you're taking care of all their stuff, but you're not being happy.
Right. Being authentic, make yourself happy. There's a big difference, because the other ways you're hiding behind other behaviors, but it takes a lot of courage to become authentic and allow yourself to be happy. What would you like to tell everyone about your book? Let it rip. What would you like? Why should they all buy your book?
Why should they buy my book? And I kind of mentioned this before. So the book is kind of broken up, and I'm going to say into 3 sections. Well, 1, 4. So first I tell my story, which is a little long, but I'm just going to tell you it because it's like 14 pages long, and it just covered the surface, So for an example, talk about trauma. So I have, this is going to sound so weird. So I have a older sister whose name was Rita, who was still born. And so they buried her, and it's kind of like, how can you name me after some freaking dead sister baby thing?
Tradition, right? Because in the Jewish faith, they name someone after someone who's passed.
But it's not a sister.
I don't know, but that's what they did.
I would never name, a new dog the same as my old dog.
Right. I hear you. At least change the first name or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so again, 14 pages long, but it kind of gives you my story so you can kind of understand me, that it's not like, oh, I didn't get the red bicycle when I was 6, when I asked for it, and now I have all of this trauma. It's a pretty in-depth story, but again, just skimming the surface. And then it goes into really doing this self-assessment. It talks about, attachment styles, and was I abused, and where was your place in the family dynamic, because all of these things have an impact on who we are, because in those formative years, that's where all the programming was created, and there's a lot of people that will sit there and say, oh, well, my childhood was good. And they have this very Pollyanna kind of attitude toward it. But when you kind of drill down into their story,
not so much. It sounds to me like people who are wondering and are not totally happy and will need to figure out if they need to go for healing or if they need help. Your book is a perfect book to read to find out if you got some pieces that need attention.
But let me just quickly go over the other parts. And so that's the second part is that self-assessment. But then it really looks at the empath and narcissist relationship, because usually the most unhealed empaths will attract the most toxic narcissists. And that's why it's the dysfunctional dance, because they feed each other in a very unhealthy way. So it talks about what it is to be an empath, what it is to be a narcissist, and then it talks about this dance that they have with each other. And if you think you've experienced narcissistic abuse, it really covers a lot of information. There's one chapter called The Life Cycle of the Narcissistic Relationship, which kind of takes you through these stages. And I'm telling you, when I was working on this book, oh my God, Irene, I'm sitting there and I'm reading this stuff, like gaslighting or love bombing, and I'm word salad. And I'm reading this stuff in articles as part of my research. And I'm like, and I was like, oh my God, and there's even a word for it. And so they're very consistent. They have a pattern of what they do. And, it's really a matter of recognizing the pattern as early as possible.
And getting the courage to, if you feel that you've got to get out, or what you give it, do you give advice in the book for where people can go if they identify? I mean, I'm in this terrible marriage now. I realize it now after reading this book more than ever. Now, what's my next step to get out of here without getting killed?
It talks about exit strategies, but it also provides information on healing. It talks about mindfulness or journaling, or how to work on healing the body, grounding, which is an energy medicine technique. And so it gives you some tools to work with to start that healing process, because sometimes the healing process has to begin before you even leave the relationship so that you can get that strength. But it also talks about, okay, the love is gone, the thrill is gone. What do I do next? And offer some practical advice for people to exit stage left and safely, because in some situations it's not safe.
Absolutely.
To get out of the relationship.
Right. So now, why is it important for a person to heal? I mean, instead of just sitting in their poo, sitting in their swamp, doing this, why should people really think about this, get a book like this, and try to improve their lives before they cross over?
Well, one, you'll have to come back and do it again, but
yes.
No, but actually, if you just point the finger and go, well, they did this and they did that, and you don't do anything to change yourself on the inside, you are going to end up attracting the same person with a different body again. And, the details might be different, but you're going to stay stuck in that pattern. And the only way to get out of the pattern is to change yourself. I mean, I don't know if you've had other people on here that have talked that, a person has done healing on themselves, or they've grown within themselves, and then they find that all of their friends kind of drop off.
Oh, we talk about that all the time. Absolutely. You're changing. You're not a vibrational fit for these people anymore.
Right. And so if you kind of use that same mentality as you heal yourself, those lower level, yucky, narcissistic people aren't going to be attracted to you anymore. Or they're going to be attracted to you like a moth to a flame, because your light is very bright, but you would have more tools to recognize it early on and be like, thanks, but
right.
No thanks. Got to go.
Wow. Okay. So now they're reading your book and they've decided they want to go to you for an intuitive clairvoyant reading, a medical intuition reading, a spiritual energy medicine healing. How can they get a hold of you, Rita?
Sure. So my website is soulhealer.com, soulhealer.com. And, I recommend to people to use the contact form on the page, because I'm not as good as answering my phone because of all the spammy stuff. And if you just write an email that says like hi in the subject line, I have a very heavy delete finger. But if it comes through that contact form, I always read them and respond. And I'm
soulhealer.com, everybody.
Soulhealer.com. And the books are on there. There's a ton of articles. I have a healing trauma, so this was really talking about healing more childhood type stuff, even though a lot of the techniques are the same. But I have fairly recently released a healing trauma series that talks about the stress response and dissociation. And it's a series of about 15 articles.
Okay, well, that's great. And what is the Rita tip for finding joy in life?
The Rita tip for finding joy in life is to really monitor what's going on inside. If you're not happy, if you're not feeling grounded, if you're not feeling content, and you discover that you feel that way more days than not. I mean, we all have bad days, in a relationship, you have bad days. But if every day is a bad day, or if most days are bad days, then you really need to stop and evaluate what's going on and make a decision of what needs to change in your life so that you can get back to that place of wholeness that just feels so good.
That's great. So Rita, the dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist create healthy relationships by healing childhood trauma. I think it's a very timely and insightful read that helps people gain the insights they need to heal their toxic upbringings and improve their relationships with themselves and with others. I personally relate to your book because we spoke about this from my own life journey, and I appreciate the ways you're helping people to heal and find rebirth via all the things you do. Thank you from my heart for this incredibly wise, insights-filled, and thought-provoking interview, and for all you do to help people heal and therefore have happier, more fulfilling lives. Thank goodness. And here's a reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com, and make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and especially on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit notify to make sure you'll get these inspiring interviews coming your way. Thanks so much. And as I like to say, to be continued, many blessings, and bye for now.